Well, I want to say welcome. I am excited that you're here with us at Light the Fire 2022. And I don't want to go any further without saying thank you to Cannell Cuffey, just for being a great leader and being a good friend. And he has poured into our church and poured into this event. And every time I'm around him, he's an encouragement to me. And so I want to say thanks, Cannell. And I want to say thank all of you for tuning in. We're talking about failure, and I'll just have to be straight up honest with you. I don't like failing. My personality type, I want to get it right the first time. I want it to be good. I want it to be done well. I want it to be successful. But the older I get, the more I realize that failure is just a part of life. It's just part of who we are. But I want to kind of reduce failure down to two very simple things. I think there's basically two types of failure in your life. One, I kind of think is like a catastrophic failure, and the other one is not so much. So I call them guardrail failures and trampoline failures. I know there's probably more classification of failures. If you go to some other leadership place, they probably have 100 different types of failures, but I like to reduce things down to something very simple. So we have guardrail failures and trampoline failures. So we're gonna dig into that for a second. Guardrail failure, I explain, is this. It's a failure that could have been avoided, a catastrophic failure that could have been avoided. You could have put a guardrail up to stop you from going off the road. I've had the privilege of traveling a little bit over the last 15 years, and I've been on roads in Africa, driving up over a mountain in Western Kenya, and you're driving up the mountain and you're passing people and you're doing all kinds of crazy driving that I wouldn't typically do here. And you get the keen sense that this road would be a lot safer if somebody had put a guardrail up. Just a simple thing like putting a guardrail up on one side of the road could eliminate a pile of accidents and maybe even a ton of deaths. And so this guardrail failure is a failure that we could all avoid. It's a failure that you can see coming. It's a failure that shouldn't catch you off guard. It's a failure that if you just put a couple guardrails up, it doesn't have to happen. So to everybody's disbelief though, we end up finding ourselves in guardrail failures, and they are preventable. So there's a couple things I want to talk to you about guardrail failures before we move on to the trampoline failure, which I like trampoline failures a lot more than guardrail failures. The guardrail failures, what we have to realize is it could happen to anybody if we're not careful. I've been a pastor for over 20 years, and what ends up happening in churches is you have pastors that have guardrail failures, and people say, "We never saw it coming." And so it really hurts a church when a pastor has a guardrail failure, when a pastor has a moral failure, when somebody that's looked up to always hold the moral high ground, and all of a sudden they did something that could have been easily avoidable with a couple guardrails. You see it in the business world. You see somebody who excels in business that can seemingly make endless amounts of money, only for their reputation to be totally destroyed by something that could have been avoided. And so I want to tell you first and foremost, if you're watching this today, then you have to realize you are susceptible to guardrail failures if you're not careful. If you fail to put up the guardrail that could keep you from running off the road, then the potential to run off the road is there. There's a Bible verse that's a little bit famous. It's from Proverbs. It says, "Pride comes before the fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction." So you have to realize if you play around long enough on a curvy road without a guardrail, you're gonna run off of it sooner or later. If you play around long enough on a curvy road without a guardrail, you're gonna fall off of it sooner or later. Guardrails protect us. Guardrails keep us in line. Guardrails are the things that if you start going off a little bit, they can bounce you back into the middle of the road. Guardrails are the things that keep families together and keep businesses together. Guardrails are the things that keep churches together. Guardrails are the things that keep your reputation together. Guardrails are the things that save you from catastrophic failure. So the key is to know what kind of guardrails you need. You have to be aware of the temptations in your life. You have to be aware of the things that can pull you off the side of the road. You have to be aware of the things that may be weak spots in your character, and then be willing to put the guardrail up. Not prideful in the sense that it'll never happen to me. This can't happen to me. Guardrails protect against momentum. You know, I know in business we always talk about momentum, how good it is, how easy things come when there's momentum in a business. And church is the same way. It gets really easy when the church has momentum in a direction and everybody's going in the same way and cheering and it's super excited about it. It's almost like you're gliding. On the flip side, momentum can be a really, really difficult thing to navigate. Going back to the African road story, if you're at the top of a mountain in Western Kenya and there's no guardrails and you just come sailing down that mountain, freewheeling it, and you're just coming down and it feels like a roller coaster and it's exhilarating and you're experiencing things you've never experienced before, that guardrail can keep you from running off the side of the road. It can tame the momentum in your life. Because I gotta be honest with you, some things that derail us, some things that drive us off the road often don't feel bad. Often don't seem that bad in the moment. They seem to feed us a little bit, and the momentum starts carrying us and carrying us and carrying us. And then before you know, we've driven off the side of the road. So the guardrail is there to put checks and balances in place in our personal lives and our businesses. I want to ask you a question. Who knows everything that you're doing? Who do you trust to know where you go and who you have lunch with and who you're meeting at night? Who in your life? Who's the guardrail in your life to do that? Who's the guardrail in your business activities? Who's the guardrail that looks at the books and says, I don't know if that's a good idea? Who's the guardrail that looks at your family circumstance and speaks into it about how much time you're spending with your family, how much time you're spending outside the home? Who's the guardrails that you put in place to make sure the momentum doesn't carry you away? Think about that. Who's acting as the guardrails in your life? Because here's the honest assessment of your life and mine. The curve is coming. There's no chance it's not going to. The curve is coming. The late dinner with someone of the opposite sex who's not your spouse is coming. The enticing after work drink with somebody else is coming. The shady business deal that may not be totally illegal, but is the momentum is going that way. It's coming. And you have to have guardrails up. You have to have them to say, hey, wait a second, I can't do that. So I can't run down that road. I can't take that curve full speed. I can't just let the momentum carry me on. Because guardrail failures change your reputation. I've been doing this long enough that I've seen pastor after pastor be at the pinnacle of success in the church world and failed to put any guardrails up around themselves. And then all of a sudden their whole reputation was wrecked. And I want to say this real quick. You can come back from a guardrail failure, but it will take every ounce of energy and strength clawing your way back to regain a reputation. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 2 years. It becomes a life work to rebuild a reputation over something that could have been avoided. It's not easy to come back from. Moral failures change us and they actually change what we're capable of in the future. They change how people look at us and they change what potential we have. Sure, I read the Bible and I'm sure if you've read the Bible, you know the same thing. There's been a lot of instances in scripture where people had moral failures and did the wrong things. But they never seem to come back all the way like they were before. You see, as a pastor, I have to let you know up front, God's intention for you is to never have a guardrail failure. That's not God's intention for you. God's intention for you is to put the guardrails up, to keep you on the straight path, not to veer off from the right and the left. To be consistently good in business with guardrails around you so you don't veer off. To be consistently aware of potential mistakes down the road that could be catastrophic. I'm always shocked when I hear people say, well, I didn't see the affair coming. I didn't see the bad business deal. I didn't see the illegal thing coming. It just caught me off guard. And I want to say this to you. If you put guardrails up first, it will never surprise you when you see the curve coming. If you put the guardrails up first, if you take the time, maybe you're watching this, you're 25 years old, and you're just starting out, you're 20 years old just starting out, and you're just trying to scratch and claw and make your way into it and find a spot to fit in. Let me tell you, the most important thing you could do right now in your life is set up guardrails. The most important thing you could do to avoid catastrophic failure in your relationships and business is set up good older people around you that have been around long enough that can say, hey, you know what? That drink after work wasn't a smart thing to do. It's not your husband, it's not your wife. That trip you're taking by yourself is probably not a smart thing to do. Set up the guardrails so when the curve comes, you can anticipate what's coming. You can know that I can't get too far out of line. I've got protections put in place for me. Build the guardrail first. If you found yourself in that circumstance, put up guardrails. Call somebody immediately. As a pastor, it's always 100 times more difficult to have somebody call me and say, hey, listen, this is what I did versus can you help me not do it? Now I'm in this circumstance where my marriage is falling apart and my business is falling apart, and it's because of what I did. I didn't put guardrails up. But if somebody would call me and say, hey, listen, I need some help putting guardrails up because I don't want to ever have this happen to me. Man, I am with you and for you. Let's put in place a plan that keeps you from having an affair, keeps you from having a catastrophic failure. Put guardrails up in your life to keep that from happening. So that's the first kind, the catastrophic failure. We want to avoid that at all costs. I want your legacy to be, I was in business 50 years without any real problem. I'm not talking about regular employee problems or personnel problems or supply problems. I'm not talking about those type of things. That you never had a catastrophic failure. I want to hear stories that come out of this that I've been married 50 years and never had a catastrophic failure in my marriage. I was faithful. You can get that from guardrails. So we want to avoid that kind of catastrophic failure. The other failure that I talked about was called trampoline failures. That's what I call them. Because as much as you want to avoid a catastrophic failure, you want to embrace trampoline failures. Come on, you remember when you were a kid? Well, let me back up a second. I'm old enough to remember when I was a kid, you had no sides on the trampoline. So it was fun. You got to jump up and try to knock your friend off of it, all that kind of thing. Now trampolines, I think, are a little more safe, but a trampoline failure is a failure that you can bounce back from. Pretty simply. It's a failure that might not even decrease the momentum in your life. Because after all, the more you jump on a trampoline, the higher you can go. And I've heard it today already in some of the talks. Some of you out there listening, you are thinking that you're a high achiever, that failure is the worst thing could ever happen. And I can't stand the idea of being wrong and everything I have to do is work. The quicker you embrace trampoline failure, the higher you'll go. The quicker you embrace the idea that there will be some form of failure in your life pretty much through every season. You'll be able to look back and say, I didn't get that 100% right. I didn't get that 100% right. I tried that and it didn't work. I tried this and it doesn't work. We're not talking about catastrophic failure anymore. We're talking about I tried something and it didn't work or I wasn't good at it. So I jumped. I might have landed on my butt. I might have landed on my back. I might have landed on my feet, but I landed. And if I handle that failure well, if I treat it the way it should be treated, not as catastrophic, but as a learning point. Hey, wait a second, I just figured out not how to do that. I just figured out that in this type of environment, that type of business plan doesn't work. I just figured out that maybe I did have a good business plan and the market shifted. Maybe the workforce tightened up. Maybe the housing market crashed. Maybe all these things out of my control. So it wasn't about guardrails. It was about, this is a really good idea. And then something shifted. Okay, so now I bounce back up and I realize now I can read markets better than I ever could. Now I can assess the circumstance better than I ever could. And so I want to encourage you, if you're young in here and you're just starting out, never be afraid of trampoline failures. Embrace them, learn from them. When you give your best effort and knowledge and it doesn't work out, when you put your heart and soul into it, you got advice, you were patient, you had everything in place, yet it didn't work out. That is just a trampoline failure. You've heard over and over again through the history of the United States even, all kinds of discoveries were made from just people failing over and over and over. Not guardrail failures, but trampoline failures where they bounce back really quick. That didn't work, I'm gonna try something else. That didn't work, I'm gonna try something else. That didn't work, I'm gonna try something else. Until finally, they hit the bottom, bounce back up, and then they're successful. So I know we live in a culture that highlights success is this thing you come up with, one good idea, you put it online, and then the whole world wants it. But I'm telling you, that is not true. That is not how real success, lasting success happens. How lasting success happens is from you being determined to not let trampoline failures keep you down. Bounce back, be determined. I realized that right now, that between the church and another business my wife and I own, we manage about between 25 and 30 employees. Now I'm 45 years old, I've been married 25 years, I've got 3 adult children. What I realized was at 25 years old, I didn't have the capacity to manage 30 people, manage 30 employees, much less manage a whole church. But what happened was I was persistent and consistent where, okay, that didn't work. The way I handled that circumstance didn't work. When there was 2 employees, the way I handled that didn't work. The way I handled this didn't work. And so I just kept bouncing back. And now that there's 25, 30 employees at any given time, now I'm much better at handling things that go on in the offices. I'm much better at being able to contextualize relationships and being able to handle all things. Why? Not because I did everything right at 25, because I screwed a lot of it up. But I didn't just keep laying down on the trampoline. I realized, hey, wait a second. If I hit right, I can bounce back up. And it's not a moral failure. It didn't affect my reputation. It didn't affect any of that. If anything, it taught everybody around me that I wouldn't give up. You hit the bottom of the trampoline, you bounce right back up. Okay, that didn't work, I'm gonna try this. That didn't work, I'm gonna try this. That didn't work, I'm gonna try this. And I'm gonna keep going at it and keep going at it. And the Bible talks about that's how we build perseverance in our lives. That's how we build character and hope. And so we get these circumstances where life is gonna hit you and some things you try, a lot of things you try are not gonna work. But you gotta remember you're on a trampoline of life. You're not hitting the hard concrete floor. You're on a trampoline. And how many success stories have you heard where this went wrong and that went wrong and this went wrong and that went wrong? And the only thing that made them different was they kept bouncing back, and kept bouncing back. I want to give you this. Take every trampoline failure and use it as the most sacred knowledge you've ever learned. Assess what happened. Don't just throw it out as worthless. Take it and assess it and figure out, man, I just realized that there's a way I shouldn't do this, or I should change this, or I should change that. I can tell you this, you'll become known for being able to learn from your own mistakes. That overcoming, it's less about clawing your way back now. It's not claw your way back from a moral failure. It's a bounce back from a trampoline failure. I want to also tell you this, your mentality will make the bounce higher. If you determine that you will learn from every mistake, the next time you'll bounce higher than the last, and you'll bounce higher than the last. And I can tell you, after being at a church 25 years, my bounce is higher now than it was 25 years ago, because I have the accumulated knowledge now of a whole bunch of bouncing on trampolines. So never think, here's a couple rules for your mentality for bouncing back. Never think you're the smartest person in the room. You will not bounce if you're always the smartest person in the room. Your pride will remove the bounce. Ask tons of questions. If you fail, get in front of people and ask them why. There's smart people out there that can see why you failed before you even realize it, and they can help you with your bounce. Invite critique in your life. So this paints kind of the picture. Have you ever been on a trampoline where you fell back, but there was 3 or 4 more people on the trampoline, and as soon as you fell back, they jumped? And when they jumped, their energy propelled you even higher than what you could have bounced back on your own. So something I've learned after all these years at the church is this: critique always makes me bounce higher. Every time. I get critique every week after every sermon. I get critique. I pass out 360-degree critiques to our leaders here at the church. We're constantly asking people, hey, how do you think I did on that? How do you think I did on that? Do you think that was a smart move? Do you think this was going on? Because I know that their critique can give me more momentum on the way back up. I know that the bounce will be higher if other people are jumping with me. And so I want to encourage you today. There are catastrophic mistakes that I believe if you do the right things up front that you can absolutely avoid. A moral failure is not your destiny. A broken up marriage is not your destiny. An illegal business is not your destiny. Getting in trouble is not your destiny. Those are avoidable things. They're easily avoided by putting guardrails in your life. Start today. Let somebody speak into those parts of your life that you haven't been talking about, and you can avoid those in the future. But as far as the trampoline ones, you embrace them every time. You embrace them. You don't hide them. You don't be ashamed of them. You just embrace them. And you get some people around you that'll help you jump, that'll help you bounce, and you learn. You invite critique. You learn from your own mistakes. Never be too prideful. And my prayer for you today is that you'll bounce higher than you ever have. Avoid the catastrophic things that could wreck your life, and let those other failures propel you into something you never imagined was even possible. I think that's the destiny you could live. I think that's your future, and I'm praying that way for every single one of you. I want to say thanks for showing up today and participating and Light the Fire. I want to thank Cannell for allowing us to do this. And I want to thank you for living a good life and making the most of it.